Thank you for joining us for today's program, Unleashing Your Boardroom Potential. I'm Kathy Waller, and I am looking forward to speaking with our panelists, Abby Adlerman, Judy Reinsdorf, and Kim Turner today. I'm a proud graduate of the University of Rochester, having received my bachelor's degree in history and my MBA from the Simon Business School. I'm a member of the university's Board of Trustees and co-chair of the Women's Network. I serve as a board member for 4 public companies: Delta Airlines, the CGI Group, Cadence Bank, and Beyond Meat. And I also serve on several nonprofit boards. So this program is brought to us by the Personal and Professional Development Committee of the Women's Network and in partnership with the Simon Women's Alliance. Today's program is designed to provide key takeaways for those looking to serve as a board member. Now, before we get started, I want to share some housekeeping and helpful Zoom tips. If you would like to ask a question, you may submit it at any time throughout the conversation through the Q&A function that is located at the bottom of your screen. We will open the floor for questioning during the second half of our program. And the program, by the way, is being recorded. So let's get started. I'm going to start by introducing our guests. So starting with Abby Adlerman. Abby is a current Rochester parent. She is CEO of Boardspan, the leading cloud-based software and advisory company that focuses exclusively on helping boards of directors excel. She's one of the top board governance experts in the US. Abby brings more than 25 years of experience to Boardspan's clients, which include Fortune 500 companies, global nonprofits, and closely held entities. She has counseled the boards of Twitter, KKR, the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee, Equinix, Fortive, Ingersoll Rand, Boston Beer, Boys and Girls Clubs, and countless others, including one of my boards, Beyond Meat. She received her bachelor's degree in engineering from Lafayette College and her master's in public and private and management from Yale University. Welcome, Abby. So next, we have Judy Reinsdorf. Judy Reinsdorf is a former executive vice president and general counsel at Johnson Controls International, a global building products company. Judy has extensive experience in corporate governance and broad expertise in managing corporate and legal affairs for large public companies. Judy is a member of the university's Board of Trustees, the Women's Network, and its Personal and Professional Development Committee, and supports student career initiatives as a George Eastman Circle member. Reinsdorf serves on the boards of several corporations and nonprofit organizations, including Enpro Industries, Nurix Therapeutics, and the NACD New Jersey chapter. Welcome, Judy. And third, we have Kim Turner. Dr. Kim Turner brings extensive experience in public health, prevention expertise, government services, and strategic innovation. Kim has served 6 years on the Fulton County Pension Board as a board trustee. She also serves on the audit committee for the Georgia Association of Public Pension Trustees. Kim served as executive secretary on the Fulton County Board of Health. She's a national speaker on leadership and relationship building, public health impact, and risk and emergency preparedness. Kim earned her bachelor's in economics and international relations with a proficiency in Spanish, from the University of Rochester. She went on to receive a master's degree in public health at Harvard University School of Public Health and was appointed to one of the highest honors at Harvard University, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Fellow. The one-year appointment allowed her to utilize DE&I methods to further innovate policies and strategies. She was proud to be at Harvard in the EDI space for the historic appointment of the first Black Harvard University president. Turner earned her Master's of Business Administration in Finance at Brenau University before she matriculated at Emory University for a 2-year postdoctorate training, serving as the chief resident while focusing her training in oral surgery and hospital medicine before earning her DDS at the University of Maryland. So welcome, Kim.
Thank you.
So I am going to get started with some questions, and so very grateful to have the expertise of this panel with us today. So my first question is to Judy and Kim, and it's basically, why has sitting on a board been something you've chosen to do, and why would you recommend pursuing such an opportunity? How about Judy?
I'll jump in. Yeah, so
Yeah.
nice to be here. Thanks so much, Kathy, for the wonderful introduction. Yeah, for me personally, I feel as if it allows you to leverage your skills across multiple companies and industries. So in my example, I'm on a biotech startup, which is really interesting, and I'm a real learning experience. At the same time, I'm on an industrial tech company, so different issues that you're learning, but in each case, you're leveraging your skill set, depending on what that might be. So to me, the variety is really fascinating, and as well, you have this seat at the table for a job that is not full-time. It's a part-time role, but you have this sort of outsized impact because you are setting the tone at the top for the company. You're setting the strategy and direction for the company. You're hiring and managing and paying the CEO. So it's a very distinctive opportunity to have an impact across multiple companies and nonprofits, while, you know, hopefully doing other things with your life. So it's, to me, that's the excitement and the rewarding opportunity that board service provides.
Great, thank you. Kim, why would you pursue such an opportunity?
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with Judy. And not to repeat what she said, I'm 100% in agreement. One of the things that I look forward in the boards is my passion and how do I connect to the services providing. And generally, we may have a propensity to a type of board. Some people like technology boards. I've always been very attracted to boards that had a human impact. Boards that, an example would be a board that really focuses on homeless teenagers. That kind of resonates with me, or health inequities. So again, it's learning, it's sharing your talent and skills to make a global impact or a regional impact to improve communities and lives of individuals. But also, I noticed that when I serve on the board, it's not only sharing my talent, I learn a lot from other members of the board. And I think it propels me to strive for other achievements in my personal and professional development. So I'm fond of nonprofit boards, and I've served on national nonprofits and local.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask Abby, what steps should someone take who wants to sit on a corporate board for the first time, given your role supporting boards and recruiting for boards?
Yeah, so first, before I jump in and answer your question, Kathy, thank you for the warm intro, and to you and Judy and others. I had a chance to work with you and Judy professionally, but I just want to do a shout out to the class of 2025, because my kids 2025, and that's how I've gotten to know the University of Rochester. And congrats to all of you, including the participants on this webinar, for being at such a wonderful institution and your affiliation with them. As far as corporate boards and preparing for them, you know, there was a comments that Kim just made about passion, and you know, I cannot underscore that enough. I think that's spot on. I always tell people, like what you do and like who you do it with, and it's especially true with boards, because pursuing a board because you think that's your next career move is actually the wrong answer. You have to really be excited and want to lean in and help that organization. And whether that is around biotech or industrial technology, Judy gave some examples, or widgets or some services for your community, you really have to believe in what they're doing. And you also have to believe in the people that you're doing it with. Now, it may be a board that's being built, and you may be part of that build. So, you know, they're always on a journey. Boards are always on a journey. But know that who you're sitting around the table with is critically important, and you might be part of improving it. And the reason that you're there is critically important. So those are kind of like my opening premises for going on a board.
Okay, thank you. So it's not because it's your next career move. Got it.
Exactly.
Good,
Exactly.
okay. So the majority of boards of directors in the United States are white and male. As of this spring, Fortune reports that 78% of board and of directors identify as white and 68% identify as male. So then, how can women and women of color position themselves for board service? I'm going to ask, come at Kim and Abby.
Go ahead, Kim.
I'll get started on that. That's a great question, and I'm happy to answer that one. I always look at, and according to my research and studying boards and women on boards and focusing more on relationships and resume, overwhelmingly, relationships is really important. And so it is, women have time to develop that relationship over their career journey. And it's important to identify individuals that you can establish an authentic relationship with, to learn and grow and position yourself to, to be successful, to be on board. It is true that underrepresented minorities may have to have a more of a balancing act in developing a relationship. And so and I always say, well, resume is very important, but you have to balance the relationship building as well as the resume building. And so I call it the catwalk, and I can later go and talk about how do we unravel and how do we peel the onion to develop a really good relationships. But I think you really have to start off with making your assessment of why you want to be on the board, making a reassessment, and developing key people you want to develop relationships in the future. So Abby, I'm going to toss it back to you, Abby.
Okay, well, I'm going to build on your points, Kim, because I very much agree with them. And I would just say that, this whole conversation about adding diversity to boards, the truth is that we have made some progress, not enough, but at least we have moved the needle. And so that's why the statistics that Kathy just read, while it might be concerning, are actually better than they were 3 years ago. But we still need to do more. And my advice is to play to your strengths, because there is tremendous talent within people of all genders, of all ethnic backgrounds and races, and all types of ways to think about diversity. And so you want to play to the strengths and the expertise that you bring to build people's confidence in having you in the team. I talked earlier about passion for what they do, culture in terms of getting along with others on the board or finding a way to get your voice heard on the board. If you're not sure, well, how do I make that case for myself? What are my strengths? Like, I know what I'm good at, but is that relevant to a board? I would actually step back and do a little bit of a self-assessment. And ways to do that are write your own board profile. Most of you who are interested in boards probably have a LinkedIn. By the way, if your LinkedIn says what you did and what years you did, it's not enough. The world has become very lazy thanks to technology. And if all a recruiter or somebody who's leading a board search for their own organization can see your job title and your years, they don't really know what you did. So this is not a time to be shy or too humble, but explain what you did, what your accomplishments are. So get your profile. If you're don't feel like doing it on LinkedIn, or you want something specific to boards, the risk of being commercial, it's free, so I don't make any money on this, but BoardSpan actually has a set of tools where you can build your profile. It's specifically created just for boards, for board members. Write your pitch. Do know your elevator pitch, because if somebody says, hey, Kathy, this board I'm on has an opening, are you a fit? You can't take 20 minutes to try and wander through the desert and figure that out. You really need to have it down pat. And then the last thing, and this is going a little bit back to Kathy's first question to me, is to use your network, because your network is the best source of ways to get on boards. But I did digress a little bit, and apologies for digressing. I just want to underscore, it's the rare person that wants to be on a board because they check the box. And if you are on the board because you check the box, there's a pretty big risk your voice isn't going to be heard. So you want to go back to those things that are really your superpowers, and it's up to you to identify them.
Okay. So we've talked about having passion. We've talked about playing to your strengths, building relationships to help you get to that important board position, and doing a little self-assessment of yourself. So you've done all this work to help you figure out whether you're prepared to be on a board. Then let's say in preparation for the day, you're thinking about your values you bring, and are they aligned with a board that you want to serve on? So how important is that? How important is it to know if the board's a right fit for you? And let's say I'm going to ask Abby and Judy.
Sure, I'll go ahead. I think I always think about the boards and the company's mission and purpose. So that should be the initial question you ask yourself. What is their mission and purpose? Can you articulate it? And then can you get behind it? So it's very similar to what Abby said about, this can't just be a resume filler. This has to be something that you truly care about, and that's something that you feel as if you can have an impact. So I think if you can start with that question and answer in the affirmative, I think that's the first step. But then you have to look at other kind of layers of fit. So there's culture fit, and industry fit. Those are the two things I think about. So culture fit, it comes in many different forms, but it's what is happening in the boardroom. And do you feel that what's happening in the boardroom is good, constructive dialogue, that you can have a voice at the table, and again, express yourself in a way that's going to lead to good outcomes? And it's hard to answer that question. It's a little amorphous question to answer, but you can get at it in interviews, which I'm sure, there are some techniques, but can you build a rapport with the chairman of the board? Do you feel comfortable with the CEO? What is that CEO's reputation? All of those things go into, in my view, culture fit. And so that's something is really important. And then the last thing I think is industry fit, where you have to just make sure that your skills will have an impact in the boardroom. So I always use the banking example. If somebody calls me and says, do you want to be on a bank board? The answer for me is going to be no, right? I am not a financial expert. I do not have a finance background. To me, that's not a good industry fit for me. So I do think it's a big world out there. So you do want to think about where is your industry fit. And some of us who are generalists can cut across many industries. But so there you have to be, I think, a little bit more fine-tuned in what you want, where you want to play. So I think it's industry fit, culture fit, and then this big mission and purpose fit.
Okay. Abby, anything to add to that?
Yeah, the one other area, everything Judy said is absolutely true in my world also. But the one thing I would add is get a good sense of the commitment that's expected. There is a misperception that boards meet quarterly and I come to the meeting and they fly me in and I have a meal and that's that. Well, the vast majority of board work is done in between meetings. There are many, many committee and ad hoc meetings or just calls from management or fellow board member to weigh in on something that happened in between meetings. And so what's expected of you in terms of your time and your depth, a little bit of what Judy referred to is how much is expected of me to know about this business and this market and regulatory issues and what's changing. And some of that might be knowledge you already bring. Some of it is fine, it's knowledge you acquire along the way, but that's going to take your time as well. So part of being values aligned is knowing what's expected of you to put in, and the role that how you're going to engage in the boardroom. Do they want board members that nobody wants to be a yes person, but do they want board members that are going to be really, a little bit calmer and listening and pick their spots? Do they want board members that are like totally reactive, etc.? I'm not saying there's a right or a wrong. I'm saying that there are different expectations, and what you don't want to do is go in with those expectations misset.
Mhm.
So that's all part of the values as well.
Right, totally agree. Yeah, so I mean, and what you all getting to board, it's work. It's called board work for a reason. It is work. And can be a lot of work, depending upon the board for sure, but also depending upon the circumstances. There are set meetings, and then things happen, and there are other meetings that all of a sudden show up that you have to participate in. So it is a lot of work. Now, corporate boards and nonprofit boards each have special considerations. What should someone consider when preparing to join these different types of boards? And I actually would add a third. I'd say private boards, right? So a public board and a private board also have different considerations. So how about Abby or Judy? You want to, either of you want to opine?
Yeah, I would say for nonprofit boards, you want to ask the question whether it's a fiduciary role or an advisory role. I think when it's an advisory role, it's a little bit less time commitment, and obviously less liability exposure. So I think that's a very important question to find out. Sometimes when you're in a chapter network, it's advisory and not fiduciary, and there's like a parent organization over the top. So to me, that's an important consideration. I think for nonprofits as well, sometimes it's the ask financially, and you want to have an understanding of what that ask is, and they call it the give and the get. What can you give financially, and what can you go get from others? So for some people, fundraising is not their expertise or their desire. So I often say to people, think about those nonprofit boards where they don't want you for your fundraising, but they maybe want you for your other skills if you don't like fundraising. So that's one thing. I think on the for-profit boards, I always start with the liability question. Of course, I'm a general counsel by training, but you want to know what kind of risk you're getting yourself into, because there is joint and several liability for any types of errors or omissions that are very significant, and a breach of that fiduciary duty. So it's rare for boards to be held accountable for breaches of fiduciary duty, but it's not unheard of. And so I always like to ask that question of what kind of protections are in place and how well does that board work together? Because it's your reputation that's on the line, and you're tying your reputation to these 9 other people on a 10-person board. So to me, it's a very significant undertaking to analyze that risk exposure and whether you feel confident about being able to work with those people, and confident that you aren't putting yourself at personal risk. So I know that may not be everybody's perspective, but that's certainly my perspective. It's your time and commitment, which Abby mentioned earlier. And for for-profit boards, it can be 300 to 400 hours a year. It depends on episodically what's happening. If there's a CEO transition, if there's any type of crisis management event, it's going to be more significant. So I think thinking about all those layers of time, money, and liability. And for private, I think about ownership, right? Because private companies can be family owned, they can be closely held. Is there a big private equity owner in there? What does that ownership scheme look like? And, how do you feel like you can relate and have impact with that ownership scheme?
Okay. All right. Kim, anything to add on not-for-profit boards?
No, I'm in agreement with exactly what Judy said, but nonprofit can also have an extensive amount of time and development, fundraising, and so it's to be knowledgeable of your passion, make sure it aligns with the mission and the goals of that nonprofit.
Thank you. And then Abby, anything to add on either of those types of boards?
Yeah, the one thing I would say is in common with public, private, and nonprofit is I would urge you to look for a strong governance structure, respect for governance. And if they're not there, part of why you're talking to them about going on the board is that they want to improve the governance. Because regardless of the corporate structure and tax status and all the other stuff that is part of the differentiation in those three, is the fact that you don't want to be on one of these boards if the board is, as Judy said, going to incur unnecessary liability, but also just not able to do its job. And that's true across all sectors. So understand, you know, why they want you, what you're there to give, and what you're going to get out of it. And the one comment, in case we don't come back to nonprofits, is a lot of people are, there's a little bit of this myth of the join a nonprofit board and then you'll get on a corporate board. And then a lot of people have debunked that and said, that's a horrible way to get on a corporate board. I'm sure that among the four of us, we have at least 5 opinions about that. But I will say that nonprofit boards can be incredibly satisfying. They can really kind of be not just only good for the soul, you can learn a lot and really enhance your network. So, you know, you have to believe in the mission first and foremost, but it is true. You can meet some fantastic people on nonprofit boards and really hone your governance skills.
Thank you. Thank you all. So I had, I just want to throw in a question about private versus public. So I had heard that more private boards use your skills more, where public boards are more about governance. So you actually probably be more active of a board member. What's your opinion about that?
For me or for anybody? Yeah.
Abby, yeah. Anybody can answer anything, but
yeah. Yeah, I think a lot has to do with, you know, private, what stage is that private company at and what skills do they need? So, because that's, as we all know, the private market, the private board's probably the largest segment of all. There's so many private organizations, people may not realize that, that are sizable enough to need a board. And so I think it really does depend upon where are they in their own journey. And a lot, honestly, has to do with how much the CEO wants your help. One thing we didn't quite touch upon, but all 3 of you know as very experienced board members, is that there's a bit of a line in what's the role of a board member and what's the role of management. And that line will vary company by company, CEO by CEO, and even the moment in time, which you referred to earlier, Kathy. Does the CEO and management team need the board to lean in a little bit more, need to open some doors, be a sounding board for strategy, push them on whether we're doing the right things in sales and marketing or product development or whatever? Or is everything humming, we're going well, and we really want our board to be more generative in thinking about what's the world looking like in 5 to 10 years, which is a luxury and wonderful, but not always. You know, it really depends upon what helps the company the most. That's true whether you're public, private, or nonprofit. So I think back to your specific question, it's really hard for me to generalize, but I would say it depends upon where that company is in its journey. I would say a private board filled with governance wonks probably is over the top. But that's probably even true for a public board.
Okay, thank you. So before we open the floor to our attendees, can each of you share something that surprised you about sitting on a board that would be helpful for our audience today? And I'll start with Kim.
Thank you for that question. What surprised me the most is the requirement of having good connectivity. And that's like a step above relationship building. And just to get on the board, I was surprised that to reach that level, the pinnacle level of connectivity, of relationship is connectivity, that someone on the board, when they were deciding to select you to be a participant or a member of the board, they had to go to bat for you. They had to speak for you in your absence and basically fight for you, or, you know, rally the troops for you. So what I didn't realize, there was a lot of that discussion going on to make sure that you're going to be a good fit. And so I know Abby and Judy both mentioned about being a good fit and leaning in, and that's all, it's really, really important. But it surprised me the most to realize the amount of work and effort it takes to find a good fit and a good member to add value to the board.
Yeah, okay. great, thank you. Judy?
Wow, there's a lot of things I could talk about, but I would say the biggest surprise for me personally was when I joined a nonprofit and I saw how dysfunctional it was. Like there was a lot of happy talk before I got in the room, and then I got in the room, and I, because I'm a governance expert, it probably struck me the wrong way, probably sooner than other people. But there was just like a lot of socializing in the board meeting instead of board work, and then there was some infighting going on. So I would say the governance point that Abby made is really important. What processes do they have? Are they pretty grounded? And do they have a routine around decision making so that you're not in this boardroom just wasting your time, right? And so I think, to me, like for-profit boards, we have things we absolutely have to do at every board meeting, and the agenda is so tight, and we can't really stray from the agenda for public companies. But I feel like with nonprofits, there's a lot more leeway, especially for advisory nonprofits, and you just want to make sure they're doing real work in that room so that you don't feel like you're wasting your time. So that was a wake-up call for me on my first nonprofit.
Okay, thank you. Abby, anything to add?
Yes, so as you know, Kathy, I don't get to sit on boards right now besides my own, because I advise so many.
Mhm.
So my perspective will be a little different. There's two things that were surprises as I really, sort of developed a deep, deep involvement in this space. One is, we talked about earlier, how much work it is. Do not fool yourself. It's a lot of work. And we talked a little bit about examples of that, so I won't reiterate. But the second thing is more when I look at the landscape of all these different types of organizations that we advise, and they all need governance, and they all need great board members, and they all need to sort of really have their foundation in place. But the variability still surprises me to this day. Some really amazing organizations that we all respect, that I'll never name because I can't. But the way they run their board meetings, the way they think about their assessment process, the way they pick future board members, it is very shockingly variable, even though we all know that there are best practices. And that just reminds me that you kind of have to meet organizations where they are. So Kim's and Judy's comments about, sort of networking and paying attention to the needs of that organization, et cetera, are totally spot on, because no two are exactly the same. And so you have to be agile.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we do have some questions in the chat. So the first is about ageism. So how to, help someone leverage their extensive professional and personal experience when they are already at 69 years old, for instance. Any ideas?
I can jump in. I think the boardroom is one of those rare places where I don't find ageism to be a significant issue. I think the statistic now is that less than a majority of boards have a cap on service at 72 used to be the common cutoff, but now I'd say less than half even have a cutoff. So I think if you bring unique experience to a board with significant experience, it's not going to be a strike against you that you're 69. I really don't believe that it would be. I have a very dear friend who is constantly being recruited to boards, and he's 71, and he's always turning them down. So I do think that if you don't have unique and important skills by this point in your career, then obviously it's going to be a challenge. But I think if you are very skilled and have a good network, it should not be an obstacle.
Okay. Fantastic. Any other comments there before we move on? Okay.
Well, I'll say one thing, which is not about age, but it's to Judy's very last point, which is your skills. There's an awful lot of interest in boards of making sure that they have the skills that they personally don't have. So if you've got a board of a bunch of, late 50s, 60-year-olds, they won't look at age as much as, do you know a lot about AI? Do you know a lot about cybersecurity? Do you know a lot about, globalization in our product area or something like that. So my advice to people is, regardless of your age, stay current on the issues that boards have to worry about, because that should be the conversation you should be having, about where do you add value and are you current with the issues, because they're moving fast and furious.
Great, thank you. So someone asked, is being on a board something you apply for, like on Indeed, or is it something you are scouted for? Abby, I think that's right up your
It is, but I'm trying to give other people a chance. It's rarely something you apply for. There are some, well, it depends. In certain nonprofits, they might post, and there are, there are some networks that do that. A couple of organizations that will let you post your resume, etc. The corporate boards for sure are using the scouting, and they typically hire recruiters, or at a minimum use their own networks to get some of that cultural fit. Kim talked about network. Judy's doubled down on culture fit also. So I would say the typical experience that most of us have had is you get a call from a recruiter or a call from somebody who's involved in that board saying, I want to recommend you. But don't be shy. If you hear about an opportunity, use your network. Don't be shy, and don't hold back on that one. We at Boardspan, just to lend some clarity to my earlier comments, we don't accept applications. I mean, you can write a profile and it will be in our database, and our team, we've got a 6-person recruiting team, will go and look at all of them, but they'll look at all the public resources, and there's a million databases. So we don't actually advise candidates. That's not our job. We're always working for the company or the nonprofit. So that's why all the tools are free, because we don't want to get paid by candidates. We don't want to have a conflict of interest. We do make those corporates that Kathy and Judy and those boards and Kim sit on, we make them pay us, so you guys in the audience don't have to.
Go ahead,
would
Judy.
Add, Kathy, that the one thing that Abby mentioned about, there are organizations like Women Corporate Directors, Board Prospects, to name a few, where you join those organizations and they do list opportunities. I don't know the criteria to get into them, so I think that's something worth exploring. But they do have those networks, and they're trying to feed good candidates to companies, and I'm sure there's a paywall there somewhere, but there are organizations, especially for women, there seem to be some more active organizations that are doing that. So something to look into.
Okay. One thing I wanted to ask a question about, because I have seen, as a board member, I have seen people send letters to board members and say, I want to be on such and such board. I've never seen that work well. Any comment about that? No.
I think it depends probably how well they know you, and are they reaching out to, hey, Kathy, can you give me some advice? Or, hey, Kathy,
Yeah.
I don't know you, and I see your name is listed on
Yeah.
a
Total stranger. Yeah.
Cold calling does not work. I can triple down on that one, not double down, triple down. Cold calling, not a good idea.
Right. Yeah, no, total stranger, no affiliation, blast to the entire board and to management. That does not work. That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
It's a turn off. It's a turn off. So.
It's a turn off. That's right. So someone has asked, what are some prerequisites to consider to balance your interest in board participation with realistic expectations for board service? For instance, stage of your career, exposure to boards from the other side of the desk. So you work with boards in your office, right? Focusing on a particular skill set. Any thoughts on that?
I would say if you could be a public company CFO, you're probably going to get a board seat. It's just such a highly sought after, every board needs a financial expert. So there are certain skills, and if you're a sitting CEO, everybody wants you. I don't know, are there others, Abby or Kim, that you'd add to that?
Yeah, I want to add another thing to Judy, to add on to Judy's point. I think women has to work on visibility. You know, I think women do a great job of dimming our own lights or letting other colleagues dim our lights. So there are opportunities for us to share our accomplishments with others and to increase our visibility. And it may mean that the joke we have around the office would say, yeah, just read the first page of the Wall Street Journal. And the second, before you read the second, you may want to go out and go to a corporate event. You may want to have a water cooler chat with a colleague. Just be more visible, maybe write an op-ed or something that people can know that you are actively working in this environment or in this talent skill that you have, you want to share. But I do see that women are not as visible, and you have to work at it, and you have to plan it in your schedule. You have to, and also timing is very important as well. Is this the right time in your journey that you should be searching for a board career? Maybe you have small children or a family or an ailing parent, and you have to kind of couch that. What is the best time for you to really actively pursue? But it's a journey. So you can start early as in your 20s, developing the skill sets to be on a board in the future.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. So I'm skipping around here because I think this one kind of gets to probably a lot of people's questions. What is the first step for someone to find board positions? And do you feel like the boards you serve on compensate appropriately? And how does that work? Right,
so for me, the very first step is ask yourself, why do you want to be on a board? We talked earlier about having a passion for the mission of that organization, and that's true, but there's, even before you start identifying specific places where you might want to serve, why do you want to be on a board? Because as you said earlier, Kathy, it's not just an alternative career path. And so that's where I would start, and that's going to help give you a compass on to what types of boards. When in your career, is it now, is it 5 years down the road or longer? What types of boards might you want to be on? Whether you think about it by sector, public, private, nonprofit, whether you think about it by industries that Judy talked about. As you kind of think through, I want to be on a board because I'm going to give this and get that. Start writing that down. That goes a little bit to the self-assessment that I suggested. Write that down. That's going to ultimately serve you well because A, you're going to challenge yourself, I hope, but also that's going to help you articulate your positioning. Here's what I can bring to a board. And, here's what I'm willing to commit as well. So that's where I would start the journey.
okay, great. All right. So if you want to join a corporate board in 5 years, aside from networking, what are the practical steps that should be taken? Should you have a list of target companies, or is it best to go through a recruiter that places people on corporate boards and take that opportunity that is provided to you? Any thoughts?
I'll jump in, and just on the comp question, it's all public information for public companies, not for privates. But you could easily go look and see what board of directors make. And before you decided to interview with the company, it should be public. So, I think starting with the value proposition, which is what Abby said, is really important. For me, the next step was my network. And so I would differentiate your network based on people who know your value proposition already, right? Because they've worked with you. They've seen you in action. They know what you're capable of. Those people you want to have a very candid conversation with about the fact that you would like to serve on a board. Then there's people in your network that you just know, right? They you worked on one project with them, or you served on a nonprofit board with them. That's still people in your network, but not as close to you in your network. So for that second tier, I think you would approach them with can we have coffee, just wanting to talk about who they know and just building that rapport with them. And, I think naturally it'll present itself for an opportunity to say what you're looking for, but I don't think you want to lead with that. If I work closely with somebody and have a really good relationship, I don't hesitate to tell them, oh, we just sold one of our companies and I'm now able to fit another board into my portfolio. That conversation I would have with somebody that I worked really closely with and who knows me and knows what I'm capable of. So I think you want to approach your network once you know your value proposition and the elevator pitch, but you want to do it in a way that gives real credit to the relationship. So if somebody was my boss, I don't hesitate to call them and say, here, can you help? If somebody was just somebody I met at a conference, it's a very different conversation. So I think you want to kind of layer those tiers and think about the approach. But I do think you need to be persistent about it, right? And this, I love that quote from Kim about not dimming your own light. You really do want to be persistent about it, and you want to be clear about how you can add value.
Okay.
Hey, Kathy, I'd like to add, thank you, Judy. Just the underscoring the relationship piece of this. I think in every step that you take, you have to really layer it with a good relationship and making sure the relationship is authentic and non-transactional. Because I think then the relationship has a risk of collapsing if people realizing you're only talking to them or friends with them or developing a relationship or connectivity with them because you want to get something from them. And I find that when I'm the giver, and I'm giving without asking for something, I usually get a whole lot more in return years later. And an example, if I gave at a big conference, my time and my energy, years later, it may pay off that, oh, I remember her as being a really great worker or a great a value add to the team. And then they've seen your work and realize that you're not friends with them, basically because you want to get something from them. But along the step of the way, you have to just work and secure that relationship. Some may fall off and some may really develop. And the key to knowing if you have a really good relationship is that if you're one example could be if I'm inviting you to my child's high school graduation, or I attended their parents' funeral, then you stepped beyond just relationship then to connectivity. And once you get to connectivity, it's like having a family member there. And it's like, okay, I'm going to speak on your behalf. I'm going to vouch for you, bat for you, because, we have that element of connectivity. Now, you're not going to connect with everybody. You may connect with 5 people in your entire life, at that supreme level, but it's something to work towards.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would add, I also found that just professional relationships, that don't go into that level of personal relationships, also are very helpful in securing board positions and just in life in general. I think. Anything else anyone has to add? The part of the question where she asked, the person asked about should they target a company? Have you ever seen it work when someone knew a company they wanted to be on the board of, and did that ever work? Is there a way to make that work?
I think it's hard. I think to your point earlier, Kathy, that when you get a letter saying, I really want to be on your board, it's a little off-putting. I do think, and Abby can speak to this, there maybe at least a third of boards are recruiter-driven board seats. So meaning that somebody hires a recruiter to go out and find them a candidate. So I do think your recruiter relationships matter. And for me personally, I've been on 5 publics, and 3 of those came through recruiters that I knew already, that had worked with me at Tyco or Johnson Controls. And so I do think those relationships matter, but it's very different than calling a recruiter and saying, get me on the board, right? I think it's got to be organic, a little bit more organic to me personally, but I don't know. I'm going to throw that one to Abby.
Yeah, so I think you can set your sights on, I'd really like to be on X board or Y board, because I'm passionate you know, about, I'm passionate about what they do. But don't make that your, I mean, there's plenty of other boards that could be an opportunity. So if there's something you're just so excited about and really feel like you can add value, look at who's on the board, look at who they do business with, see if you can use your network, but use those good foundational networking approaches that everybody here has talked about. And not doing it cold, as Kathy has underscored, but you know, it's like, oh, I know somebody who can introduce me to somebody. And then do not be over enthusiastic. Just like let your interests be known. And hopefully you'll have an honest, you know, broker in there that'll say, you know what, you could be great, but we're not recruiting for a year or two. We'll keep you in mind. Or, hey, in all due respect, you're not a fit for this board. You're not likely, but you know, I'm sure you'll find something else that's great. But you really want to find somebody who can kind of give you that counsel. But it's all that said, it's pretty rare that you can be that targeted.
Okay, so being mindful of time, I'm going to combine a couple of, because we had a couple of people ask about, can you help me understand the responsibilities of a board member? And then someone also asked about kind of the, I lost it, structure of a board. Any comments around board responsibilities or structure, board structure?
There's a ton of online information. Go ahead, Judy.
No, go ahead. I wasn't gonna, I mean, I think it's the basic contours of it are the board is an oversight function, overseeing management, overseeing the business strategy for the company, hiring, firing, compensating the CEO, basically ensuring tone at the top is appropriate, and understanding the culture of the company. Those are, and risk management. So those are the big buckets of what you do. And then there are the things that you have to do, like, as Kathy will appreciate, it's like approving the financial statements, and approving the comp for everybody on the leadership team. So there's a lot of work that goes into the day-to-day management of a company, and you're the oversight for that management team is the way I think about it.
And you do the committee structures, right?
And then,
the committees.
Exactly. And then you work through committees to make it more efficient. You have an audit committee, which should be obvious. They oversee the financials. And then you have a compensation committee. You typically have a nominating and governance committee to appoint new directors and to build a governance structure. And so those are the typical committees. You might, if you're pharma, you probably have a regulatory committee. You should have a safety committee if you're Boeing. Like, there are certain things that you might have that are unique to the industry, but right, it's the structure is committee work first, and then certain things go to the full board for approval.
Okay. And so how do you find a recruiter for board positions, and how do you get into their database? Abby.
Oh, okay. I just was throwing in the chat channel an article that outlines the responsibilities of a board member.
Good. Thank you.
Another shameless plug for Boardspan, and free, just to underscore, is our library, which is a collection. We are not the smartest people in the room, but we're friends with a lot of smart people. So it's a collection, a vast collection, probably the largest out there of just board only content. And we try to make the search capability better and better every month. So take a look at that if you want, or just go to boardspan.com library. How do you get a connection with a recruiter? Was that the question, Kath?
And get in their database. Yes.
Yeah. So getting in their database, quite often you just go to their homepage and click on a link, and they're going to give you an easy human interface way, because it's easier on them. The truth is they all have agreements with LinkedIn, and they're downloading. That's why I said keep your LinkedIn really, really current. They all partner with LinkedIn and scrape all that data. They scrape other data that's out there. I want to be really honest, which is if you offer them a cup of coffee or a lunch, they may or may not take you up on it. They may not even reply to your email. They get a lot of free coffee and a lot of lunch. And the truth is, and I say this with utmost of respect, having come out of that industry, that recruiters are only as good as the current project they're working on. Now, they might keep you in mind and they might know a client that's thinking about doing a search in 3 or 6 months, and they might remember you or they might not. But they're in a transactional business. That's their business model. Everybody knows that. So keeping those relationships, developing those relationships, being helpful to them. Best thing you can do for a recruiter is say, hey, if you're looking for somebody for one of your searches, maybe for not even a board search, a C-suite search, call me. I'll be happy to open my Rolodex for you. Kim made the point earlier, you got to give to get. So be helpful, cultivate them, but do not expect them to want to go to coffee and put you on a board in the first month. It takes a while.
Yeah. I would say your network is probably the best source versus trying to get to a board recruiter at this point.
Yeah, we see it as 80%. I mean, Judy said 1/3 recruiters, 2/3. Our experience is 80% happens through networks, but you know, whatever it is, it's way more than a majority.
Right. Okay. As we're wrapping up, and I certainly thank you all, Abby, Judy, Kim, for sharing your insights and your experiences. There's one question: how would you feel in the following blank? So if anybody has a word, throw it out. Don't be afraid to blank as a board member.
Be authentic.
Okay. Anybody else?
Speak up.
Speak up.
Ask questions and listen to the answers.
Awesome. Okay. All awesome comments. So thank you, the three of you. This has been great. I hope everybody else has enjoyed this as much as I have, and I hope you've gotten good, solid advice, taken the advice. So some of the things I heard were build relationships, focus on your visibility, increase your visibility, you understand your passions, use your network, be prepared, do a self-assessment of your own skills, have your elevator pitch ready for when that opportunity comes up. You know what you're going to say about yourself and how you're going to sell yourself. Work on your own board profile, just amongst a lot of other things we talked about today. So again, thank you to the three of you for your expertise and sharing it with us. Also, thanks to everyone who joined us for today's program. Thank you to the Personal and Professional Development Committee and of our Global Women's Network, and then the Simon Women's Alliance for supporting today's program. We hope you enjoyed this, and we hope you join us for upcoming programming from the Women's Network. Have a great afternoon. Miliora.